the scribes, who like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation. He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Excuse me. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
I invite you to be seated. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer.
Amen.
In our first lesson this morning, we hear the end of the story of Ruth and Naomi. Now, this is a story that has so many wonderful layers. If I took the time to elucidate all of them, we'd be here for hours. And while I know you would love that, I don't think that's probably fair to the 1 or 2 of you that might have a problem. But I will talk this morning about the main theme that runs throughout this story. But as always, I think you have to have a bit of a historical context because without it, you won't really understand the significance of the story, how radical it was for Jesus' listeners to hear, and actually how radical it is still for us today to act upon the words of Jesus. Now, the Hebrew word for widow connotes one who is silent, one who is unable to speak. In a society in which males played the public role and which women did not speak on their own behalf, the position of a widow was one of extreme vulnerability. And younger widows, as you might imagine, were often considered a potential danger to the community and urged to marry quickly. Left out of the prospect of inheritance by Hebrew law, widows became the stereotypical symbol of the exploited and the oppressed. Old Testament criticism of the harsh treatment of these women is prevalent, is found in Deuteronomy 22, Job 22, 24, 31, Psalm 94, Isaiah 1, 10, Malachi 3. So also are texts in which they are under the special protection of God. You find it again in Deuteronomy 10:18, Psalm 68, Jeremiah 49:11, Deuteronomy 14:29, 24:17, 19:21, 26-12. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. Luke 20:47, James 1:27, lest you think it's not in the New Testament. Essentially, widows were seen as having no honor and no place within the social structure of Israel without male kin to take care of them. But note that throughout the various scriptures, this ill treatment is illustrated over and over again and then condemned by God. Now, Ruth, Naomi's daughter-in-law, came from Moab, a land east of Judah, on the other side of the Dead Sea, today's southwestern Jordan. And although the language and culture of Moab and Israel were almost identical, the Israelites despised the Moabites for their numerous deities and their fertility rituals. Genesis makes the Moabites the product of an incestuous union between Lot and one of his daughters. Deuteronomy decrees that no Moabite may be admitted to the assembly of Yahweh. Isaiah and Jeremiah record oracles against Moab, and after the exile, Ezra and Nehemiah urge Israelite men to rid themselves of Moabite and other foreign wives. Overall, then, the character Ruth comes from a despised race, the lowest economic class, and the gender that is subordinate in a world dominated by men. So then why is Ruth's story in here in the first place? Why is it important? Why bother to tell her story? So let's tell the story and see why. Now, last week, I know you didn't hear this story because we used the text for All Saints Sunday. And they're different texts than what would regularly be preached on that Sunday. So you didn't hear the first half of the story, but you're going to hear it this morning. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. And they were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. When they had lived about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughter-in-laws, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughter-in-laws, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you, in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you, or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people." Does this sound familiar? And you hear this a lot in weddings. "Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. Now, you would think that maybe Naomi was kind of happy about this. You know, her daughter-in-law was that committed to her, she was going to go back with her. Well, not exactly. Actually, she's quite dismayed by this turn of events, because while she might have been willing to accept her son's choices for wives, once she returns to Judah, to her people, she will be judged and reviled for having a Moabite daughter-in-law. And so she complains and is bitter about the whole thing. She's lost her husband, her sons, now probably her people. For they will reject her. Still, Naomi is touched by her daughter-in-law's commitment and seeks to do her justice. But before we go on, I want to also lift up the fact that Ruth is not unaware of what she's going to encounter. Going into this place, she knows she's going to be reviled. She is walking into a dark space, but she will not turn back. Keep that in mind. And so we continue our story with our reading for today. Naomi said to Ruth, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you so that it may be well with you. Now here is my kinsman's Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself." You know, they leave out a whole lot of stuff in between. But I'm like, let me just put it this way. There's all these young men who've been coming after her, and she's like, no, not you guys. I know I know the deal. And she just keeps to herself. And Boaz sees her doing that and says, you know what? Make sure there's enough wheat that's left for her to glean. And so he is awed by her. So just so you know that. So there is something that goes on before this, because this gets a little bit intense here. She goes, see, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. You always have to watch out for the threshing floor and the wells. Stuff is always happening there. She goes, now wash and anoint yourself and put on your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. And he will tell you what to do. And she said to her, all that you tell me I will do. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin, and may his name be renowned in Israel. I want to go back just a little bit, because there's a little piece here again they leave out. Don't know why they do this. But Boaz decides that he wants to marry her, but he's not the next of kin, so he has to make sure that all the other men that are before him have the right to marry her. But of course, none of them want to marry her because she's a Moabite. That does not get in Boaz's way. He does not see her as a Moabite, but as a woman who has integrity, who has compassion and love. He is amazed by the respect she has for her mother-in-law. And so he takes her upon himself. That's important. So, all these things are happening. The Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. We know that God approves of what has happened, of Boaz and his integrity, of Ruth and her integrity. Forget the fact that she's a Moabite and that he's a Jew. Doesn't make a difference. He shall be to you, and we're speaking about the son now that she has. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him. That's a huge thing to say. Do you get that? More than 7 sons. Sons were everything. For a woman, you were supposed to have sons, but the women are looking. Women are so smart, just so you know. They are looking, and they said, she is more valuable to you than 7 sons, because she has stuck by you. Moabitess that she may be, she has stuck by you. She has integrity. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. The women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. The women of the neighborhood gave him a name. He is embraced and brought into the community. He's not an outsider. They named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David. And who comes from David? Out of the house of David? Jesus. Right? Ruth emerges as a shining example of womanhood and as a model of faith comparable only to Abraham, the founding father of Israel, who also abandoned all at God's call. You know, what we see is rather amazing when you think about it. Ruth, a despised foreigner, an immigrant, takes care of Naomi, a widow of Israel. Yet Ruth, too, is a widow, and who will take care of her, this foreign woman? Our text gives us our answer. Boaz, a faithful, God-fearing man of integrity, a Hebrew male, kin of Naomi, does his duty by Ruth, marries her and reestablishes the lineage of Ruth's dead husband, also Naomi's son. Things come full circle when we see that Naomi now has a male heir because of the faithfulness of Ruth and Boaz and their commitment to do what is right in the sight of God. She now has a community and a place of belonging. Neither Ruth nor Naomi are any longer foreigners. So God rewards them with a son. And let me say again, it is Obed who becomes the father of Jesse, and Jesse becomes the father of King David. And it is from the house of David that Jesus, the Son of God, is born. It is not any accident that this foreigner, this immigrant, this refugee is part of Jesus' genealogy. Ruth and Naomi's story points to the fact that caring for one another is seen not as only beneficial to the family and the community, but it is also important for the well-being and health of the nation as a whole, our world as a whole. Those who were listening to the story were probably thinking, wait a minute, a Moabitess? This was a shift. This had to be a shift in their thinking. A lot for them to chew on. Ruth's story is important to us today because it clearly models the commitment that God requires of us in loving God, and especially in loving those who are unlike us, embracing them as children of God and seeing that justice is done to who they are as children of God. We are to welcome the foreigner, the immigrant, and the refugee into our midst, for they are God's beloved, and they are our brothers and our sisters. In our gospel reading this morning, Jesus too lifts up the plight of the widow. And I should make clear that the widow is not just the widow. Sometimes words are more symbolic of something beyond what we're saying. The widow was denoted all the oppressed, any who were separated, any who were pushed out and considered not belonging, any who had power stripped away from them. So keeping that in mind, she is the one forced to give out of her meager earnings, says Jesus. And at first, we're tempted to laud this woman's willingness to give all that she has from the little she owns. Wow, how wonderful. But that's not really what Jesus is talking about. Now, yes, we could point out her generosity of heart, but Jesus goes deeper. In the previous passage, Jesus condemns the scribes for their greed and self-aggrandizement. Beware the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. Can you think of anybody? They devour widows' houses and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation. It is after this passage that we see the widow put in all that she owns. Like in the Hebrew text from our first lesson, Jesus points out the fact that the widow is a victim of an unfair system that requires she give as much from her meager resources as the scribes who are wealthy. The leaders of Israel should be taking care of the people, all the peoples, but they are more interested in their wealth, having the best of society at the expense of those who are in their care. Jesus speaks out against this kind of injustice. But not only does it tear apart the individual, it tears apart the society of which they each are a part. In both our Hebrew message and our gospel lesson this morning, Jesus reminds us of our call to love and take care of the poor, the oppressed, the immigrant, and the refugee in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our nations as a whole. For when we do so, we find that not only do we bless others, but we too are blessed. Amen. Our hymn of the day, Take My Life That I May Be. I invite you to